Landman. Season 2, Episode 6 has no business being this good. This is the episode where quiet tension finally turns into open damage, where relationships don't just crack, but start collapsing in real time, and where you can feel that the season has officially crossed a point of no return. Nothing explodes, no one screams, and yet everything feels heavier than ever. Episode 6 doesn't rely on shock value. Instead, it slowly tightens the pressure until every character is forced to show who they really are. And the most unsettling part is this: the people making the smart decisions might actually be setting themselves up for disaster. Episode 6 opens with the fallout that Episode 5 quietly set in motion. Tommy is no longer standing on solid ground, and for the first time in this season, he knows it. The authority he once carried effortlessly now feels questioned, diluted, and slowly transferred to someone else. Cammy doesn't openly challenge him yet, but her tone has changed. Her pauses are longer, her answers are colder, and that shift alone tells us everything we need to know. Tommy has always survived by being the smartest person in the room, the one who sees the consequences before anyone else does. But in this episode, his biggest problem is not bad judgment. It's being ignored. Galliano's presence continues to grow like a shadow behind every major decision, and even when he isn't speaking, his influence is obvious. Cammy listens to him differently. She looks at him differently, and Tommy sees it happening in real time, unable to stop it. What makes this episode so effective is how grounded the conflict feels. There are no villains giving speeches or heroes making dramatic stands. Instead, we get small moments loaded with meaning. A glance that lasts too long. A suggestion that sounds helpful but carries hidden intent. Galliano doesn't push Cammy aggressively. He doesn't need to. He positions himself as calm, confident, and essential, while Tommy is framed as emotional, resistant, and stuck in the past. And that framing works. Slowly, Cammy begins treating Tommy less like a partner and more like a problem that needs managing. For Tommy, this is worse than any financial threat. He can fight numbers, he can negotiate contracts, but losing Cammy's trust is something he cannot calculate his way out of. At the same time, the pressure around MTEX hasn't eased at all. If anything, Episode 6 makes it clear that the danger is no longer theoretical. The company isn't just exposed financially, it's exposed legally, politically, and morally. Every option on the table comes with a cost that will hurt someone. Cammy is forced to keep moving forward without certainty, and that responsibility is starting to harden her. The woman who once hesitated now makes decisions faster, sharper, and with less room for discussion. From her perspective, hesitation equals weakness, and weakness equals losing everything her husband built. But what she doesn't fully realize yet is that speed can be just as dangerous as fear. Tommy sees the cliff coming long before anyone else does. He understands that Galliano's solutions are clean on the surface, but radioactive underneath. The problem is, warnings only work when people are willing to listen. And in Episode 6, Tommy's voice carries less weight than it ever has. He isn't being pushed out officially, but emotionally, he's already standing outside the room. Every attempt he makes to slow things down only seems to push Cammy further away. The irony is painful. The man trying to protect the company is slowly being framed as the one holding it back. This episode doesn't rush these developments. It lets them breathe. And that's exactly why it works so well. By the end of the first act, you don't need a dramatic confrontation to understand what's happening. You can feel it. The balance of power is shifting. Trust is eroding. And once that process starts, it doesn't reverse easily. Episode 6 isn't loud, but it's dangerous. And it makes one thing very clear. From this point forward, every decision will cost someone something they can't get back. Where Episode 6 truly proves how smart its writing is, because instead of escalating through chaos, it escalates through consequences. Every storyline moves forward not by surprise, but by pressure. The characters are no longer reacting to problems. They are living inside them. And nowhere is this more obvious than with Cooper, who is finally starting to understand that adulthood does not arrive all at once. It arrives in pieces, and each one is heavier than expected. Cooper enters this episode riding the confidence he gained at the end of Episode 5. He believes he survived his first major mistake, learned a lesson, and earned a second chance. On paper, that sounds right. But episode 6 quietly shows us that learning a lesson and accepting responsibility are two very different things. Cooper wants to believe that taking Tommy's job offer fixed everything, that now he's in the game for real. But the truth is, he still doesn't fully understand the weight of the world he's stepping into. The business moves faster than his instincts, and the personal commitments he's making are growing faster than his maturity. His relationship with Ariana continues to move at a speed that feels almost reckless, and the show does not try to romanticize that recklessness. Instead, it places Cooper in moments that force him to confront reality. Spending time around Ariana's child changes something in him. Suddenly, this isn't about passion or promises anymore. It's about responsibility that doesn't wait for you to be ready. The idea of becoming a husband was already heavy. The idea of becoming a father figure hits even harder. And you can see the doubt settle in. Not because Cooper doesn't care, but because he's starting to realize that caring is not enough. What makes this storyline work so well is that the show doesn't punish Cooper for being young. It simply shows the cost of being unprepared. Tommy tries to warn him again, not harshly this time, but with the tired honesty of someone who has seen this story play out before. He knows that rushing into business and rushing into love follow the same pattern. Both feel exciting at first. Both promise shortcuts. And both demand payment later. Cooper listens, but listening doesn't mean understanding yet. That understanding is still forming, and episode 6 lets it form slowly, through discomfort rather than lectures. Meanwhile, the distance between Tommy and Cammy grows wider, and it does so in silence. They are still working together, still standing in the same rooms, but the emotional alignment that once made them powerful is gone. Cammy no longer seeks reassurance from Tommy. She seeks confirmation. And when he doesn't give it, she turns elsewhere. Galliano continues positioning himself as the calm solution in the storm, always available, always confident, and always just reasonable enough to sound right. He doesn't argue with Tommy directly. He lets Tommy argue himself into isolation. This is where the episode becomes quietly devastating. Tommy isn't losing because he's wrong. He's losing because he's alone. His warnings now sound like resistance instead of wisdom. His concern sounds like fear instead of experience. And in a world that values confidence over caution, that perception is deadly. Cammy begins making moves without him, not out of malice, but out of momentum. She believes she is doing what must be done to protect the company. What she doesn't see yet is how deeply she's changing in the process. Episode 6 also reinforces a harsh truth about power. Power doesn't disappear all at once. It shifts gradually, almost politely. One meeting you're consulted, the next you're informed, and eventually you're irrelevant. Tommy feels that progression happening to him, and it fills him with a kind of anxiety that no negotiation can solve. He is watching the company move in a direction he knows is dangerous, guided by someone he does not trust, with a leader who no longer fully trusts him either. By the end of this section, the episode has made something very clear. Cooper is growing up too fast. Cammy is hardening too quickly. And Tommy is running out of time. The pieces are still moving, but the board is no longer balanced. And once that balance is gone, every move forward becomes a risk that cannot be undone. Where episode 6 stops feeling like a slow burn and starts feeling like a warning. This is the part of the episode where manipulation becomes visible, not through dramatic betrayal, but through comfort. Galliano doesn't attack Tommy directly. He doesn't need to. He simply steps closer to Cammy while gently pushing Tommy further to the edge. And the most unsettling thing is how natural it all looks from the outside. The rodeo event becomes the perfect setting for this shift. On the surface, it's casual, social, almost harmless. But underneath, it's a power demonstration. Galliano positions himself beside Cammy with ease, speaking her language, sharing her confidence, reinforcing her choices without hesitation. Tommy, meanwhile, becomes the extra presence, the one standing slightly behind the conversation, slightly out of sync with the energy in the room. No one tells him to step aside. He just slowly realizes he already has. What Galliano does next is subtle but devastating. He plays both sides with precision. With Cammy, he frames Tommy as overly cautious, emotionally attached, and resistant to growth. With Tommy, he plants doubt by suggesting that Cammy is already preparing to move on without him. He never lies outright. He just selects the truth that benefits him most in each conversation. And that's what makes him dangerous. Every word sounds reasonable. Every concern sounds justified. By the time either of them might question his intent, the damage is already done. Tommy feels this manipulation deeply, even if he can't prove it yet. He senses that the ground beneath him is shifting faster than he can adjust. The confidence that once made him untouchable now works against him because confidence without authority looks like arrogance. And Galliano knows that. He lets Tommy speak just enough to make himself look outdated. Every warning Tommy gives is met with calm reassurance from Galliano. Every hesitation is countered with certainty. And slowly, Cammy begins trusting the voice that sounds calm over the one that sounds concerned. This section of the episode also highlights something uncomfortable about leadership. Cammy is no longer just reacting to threats. She is actively choosing the version of herself that survives them. And that version is colder, sharper, and less willing to listen. From her point of view, Tommy represents the past, and Galliano represents momentum. She doesn't believe she is betraying anyone, she believes she is evolving. But evolution always comes with loss, and episode 6 makes sure we feel that cost through Tommy's isolation. There's a moment where Tommy realizes he is no longer Cammy's first call. That realization hits harder than any argument ever could. He has spent years protecting the company from visible threats, but now the threat is emotional distance, and there is no strategy for that. He tries to regain footing, but every attempt only seems to confirm Galliano's narrative that Tommy is no longer aligned with Cammy's vision. Meanwhile, Cooper's storyline quietly mirrors this theme. He, too, is being pulled forward faster than he can process, surrounded by expectations he didn't fully choose, but now must carry. The difference is that Cooper still has support. Tommy doesn't. And that contrast matters. It shows how isolation changes outcomes. Cooper struggles, but he isn't alone. Tommy is strong, but strength without trust becomes weakness. By the end of Section 3, Episode 6 makes its most unsettling point yet. No one has officially crossed a line, no contracts are torn, no partnerships are broken. And yet, the separation is already real. Trust has shifted. Influence has changed hands. And Tommy, once the center of everything, now feels like a man watching his life rearrange itself without his consent. From here on out, any attempt to fix things will come too late or cost him more than he's ready to pay. Where Episode 6 quietly seals everyone's fate. There is no dramatic explosion, no final argument that changes everything in a single moment. Instead, the episode ends by letting the consequences settle in, and that makes it far more unsettling. By now, the audience understands that the damage isn't coming. It's already here. Tommy ends this episode in the worst possible position for someone like him. He is still employed, still present, still useful, but no longer trusted. And that is a dangerous place to exist. He knows Galliano is tightening his grip around Cammy's decision-making, and he knows that every move he makes now will be watched through a distorted lens. If he pushes too hard, he confirms the idea that he's unstable. If he stays quiet, he becomes irrelevant. Episode 6 traps him in that space, and you can feel the frustration building inside him. This isn't about ego anymore, it's about survival. Cammy, on the other hand, fully steps into her new identity. She doesn't see herself as ruthless. She sees herself as realistic. The fear that once drove her has transformed into resolve, and resolve can be just as blinding. She believes she is finally doing what her husband would have wanted, protecting the company at all costs. But Episode 6 carefully questions that belief without answering it. Is she honoring his legacy, or is she slowly losing the part of herself that once made her different from the people she now relies on? Galliano doesn't celebrate his progress openly, but he doesn't need to. His confidence says enough. He understands that influence isn't taken, it's given. And in this episode, Cammy gives it to him piece by piece. He becomes the voice she trusts in moments of doubt, the presence she turns to when pressure rises. From the outside, it looks like partnership. From the inside, it looks like control. Cooper's storyline ends on a quieter but equally important note. He stands at the edge of adulthood, finally realizing that love, responsibility, and ambition don't arrive one at a time. They arrive together, demanding more than you think you have. Episode 6 doesn't punish him for his choices. It challenges him. It asks whether he's ready to grow into the life he's chasing or if he's still running on momentum alone. The answer isn't clear yet, and that uncertainty is the point. What makes this episode better than it has any right to be is how confidently it trusts the audience. It doesn't explain every emotion. It doesn't force closure. It allows discomfort to exist. It understands that the most dangerous moments aren't loud. They're quiet decisions made under pressure by people who believe they're doing the right thing. By the final moments, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. Episode 6 isn't setting up a twist. It's setting up consequences. The cracks between Tommy and Cammy are no longer fixable with conversation alone. Galliano's influence is no longer theoretical, and Cooper's path forward is no longer simple. From here on out, Landman isn't asking who will win. It's asking who will lose the most. And that question, hey,